We're in our third installment of the seventh chapter of Jewish history, the story of modern Israel. And the last 30 years of the history of Israel were marked by a shift in direction. That shift was an attempt to create peace. And it began with a deputy foreign minister, Yossi Beilin, who was part of the Labor government in 1992. And he started to hold secret talks with the PLO, who were driving terrorism against Israel and whose charter was the destruction of Israel. Beilin went under the philosophy of, if you don't negotiate with your enemies, who are you going to negotiate with? It was actually formally illegal to do so under Israeli law. But when he came to Shimon Peres, who was the prime minister at the time, and told him that there might be some hope of progress, Peres got on board and told him to continue it. And so in the spring of 1993, September 1993, the famous handshake on the White House lawn, the Oslo Accords, were launched, brokered by Bill Clinton and Yitzhak Rabin, who we see here on the left. We see his body language, that he was very uncomfortable, if not disgusted, to have to shake the hand of Yasser Arafat that had Jewish blood dripping on it. Now, that was interestingly in contrast to Shoshana Cardin, who was the head of the Jewish Federation, who hugged Arafat, and who had an outlook that if we show goodwill, if we compromise, it will engender that kind of goodwill from the other side, and we'll all wind up being able to have a beautiful peace. And I don't think that Rabin had any such illusions. I believe he was making a calculated gamble. The gamble was this, that Arafat would be attacked for starting to embark on a peace process with Israel, that his extremists would try to turn upon him. Arafat would be forced to suppress them and eliminate them, and then he would slowly come around to making a full peace with Israel, and the extremists would be eliminated. Unfortunately, Rabin was outmaneuvered, because in effect, what happened was that Arafat did not eliminate his terrorists. In English, he would say one thing to the media about peace and going ahead. In Arabic, he would say different things, that this was a strategic move towards their final goal of the elimination of Israel. And in fact, a fundamental principle of the Oslo Accords for the PLO to change their charter never happened. And the charter still remained the destruction of Israel. Now, the terrorism continued after that. And for the next 3 years, it was very bouncy. Some people even say that Rabin himself had second thoughts about the accords themselves. But in 1995, he still convened a rally at what is today known as Rabin Square to show support for peace, to keep trying to advance the Oslo Accords. And tragically, he was murdered by another Jew. Here you see the handout of the Shir L'Shalom, a song of peace, which was sung by the whole crowd. And as he exited the event, Yigal Amir, right-wing sympathizer of extreme views on the Oslo peace process, that it was a failure, and also that Israel should never give up part of the Holy Land, and this is a matter of rabbinic debate. Rabbi Cook, Tzvi Yehuda Cook, who we saw before, held that it's Jews religiously are never allowed to give up our land. Other rabbis said, many did, that if it will save lives, then it is sanctioned. But in any case, Amir murdered Rabin, which was a terrible act, a heinous act for Jews to murder other Jews, reminiscent of the murder of Gedaliah. The day after Yom Kippur, we have a fast of Gedaliah, who is a Jewish governor over Israel under Babylonian rule, and the extremists felt like he was consorting with the Babylonians. He was appeasing the Babylonians, and so they killed him as well. It turned out that the assassination was much more complicated because Yigal Amir had a handler, had someone who was encouraging him. It turns out that person was actually working for the Israeli Secret Service. And it's not clear, was he working for the Secret Service and encouraging him as his cover, or was he trying to radicalize the Israeli right to make them look worse so that the position of peace could be promoted? And this is hotly debated until this very day. There is evidence that some of the Israelis' Secret Service and the government were printing signs against Rabin and giving them to radicals. So a very strange turn of events, but in any case, the tragedy of the assassination of Rabin, this terrible act, and in its aftermath, the difficulties of terrorism continued, and Bibi Netanyahu will be elected as prime minister in 1996. Now, part of the foundation of the Oslo Accords was a three-part division of the Yehuda and Shomron, known as the West Bank. Part of it, Area A, is administered by the Palestinian Authority completely, security and administrative life. Area B is administered by the Palestinian Authority, but security is controlled by Israel. So in effect, the vast majority of what is today 1.7 million Arabs effectively are able to run their own internal affairs and their own government, and are not under control of Israel's direct governmental direction. And the Area C was the area administered by Israel. In that area today, there are 530,000 Jews who live in that area. There are 340,000 Jews in East Jerusalem, and areas A and B are 1.7 million Arabs. So the Jewish population has rose to half of what the Arab population is in these areas. And this arrangement is still, in fact, in place. Although there's been a lot of talk lately about Israel annexing some of the areas. Undoubtedly, if they did, they would be annexing areas in Area C, where the Jewish settlements are. And the Jordan Valley, which you see on the right, on the western side, vital for Israel's security because to prevent any invasion of Israel's large border there. And that was the agreement. Now, despite the bumps and the difficulties in the last half of the 1990s, in the year 2000, Ehud Barak, a Labor prime minister, replaced Bibi Netanyahu in 1999, and he wanted to finalize the Oslo Accords into a peace agreement. So Camp David II was convened, built on the name of Camp David I, where Israel had given the Sinai back to Egypt. We see the symbolic significance. And Bill Clinton hosted for 8 days. Yasser Arafat, Ehud Barak, and Bill Clinton were sequestered alone. It is said that Arafat was offered 94% of Yehuda and Shomron, with East Jerusalem as its capital, and the other percent, some 6%, maybe a little less, would be given from Israeli lands, which would be annexed into that area, mainly in the Galilee, where there's a large Arab population. And this agreement, after 8 days of this being negotiated, Yasser Arafat walked out. He left. No explanation. And Bill Clinton to this day will say that he doesn't understand why Arafat did that, and Camp David did not succeed, and the Oslo Accords did not succeed because of Yasser Arafat. He's gone on the record as saying that. Now, if you look at the history of these peace attempts, 5 times in its history, Israel has attempted to make peace with the Palestinians. And this is very important because you'll hear people say Israel is a colonizer, Israel is expansionist, but 5 times we have attempted. In 1947, after the partition plan, as I mentioned, Israel offered to make peace with the Palestinians. The Palestinians refused the plan, we accepted it, and they attacked. In 1967, after the Six-Day War, we mentioned, in Khartoum, Israel offered to give back the areas that they took, or the majority of them, if they would recognize the state of Israel and make peace. And there were 3 no's: no peace, no negotiation, and no recognition. In 1973, after the Yom Kippur War, the same thing. Israel offered 90% of Yesha. Palestinians and the Arabs refused. And in 2000, Camp David, as we just explained, Ehud Barak offered what Clinton said would be the best offer he would get. Arafat walked out. In fact, it wasn't the best offer. In 2008, Ehud Olmert offered even more, and even offered East Jerusalem. And according to some, it's believed he offered the Temple Mount, which is under Israeli jurisdiction. He offered to give it to the Palestinians as part of their capital in East Jerusalem, and Abbas refused. And so we can only conclude that the Palestinians do not want a state. And that is the paradox, that people are still talking about a 2-state solution, which, by the way, by now, 80% of Israelis say is impossible at this point. And we can only believe that they don't want one. Why would they not want a state? Well, once again, we go back to the Hamas charter or the Palestinian PLO charter, that they are seeking to dismantle the state of Israel. Unfortunately, that is the sad truth. And what we see happened right after, Arafat walked out and started what became known as the Second Intifada. Over the next 5 years, Palestinian terrorism will turn into Israel, away from the international scene. They realized it's bad PR. And so you had these terrible tragedies. The Park Hotel being bombed during the Passover Seder. Once again, the Arabs attacking us during our religious holidays, even though they claim that Israel has to stand down during their holidays. Over 30 Jews were killed, hundreds injured at that terrible tragedy. Dr. Applebaum and his daughter, on the day of her wedding, are bombed in Jerusalem and die. The terrible Sbarro pizzeria bombing, where dozens are killed. The Moment Cafe bombing, and numerous buses. 1,000 Israelis are killed by bombing and terrorism. And eventually what will shut this down is that Israel will build a wall. They'll build a wall along the border between Judah and Shomron, called the West Bank, and Israel, preventing terrorists from coming in, and it eventually stopped. Now, in 2005, there'll be another dramatic move in the Israeli-Palestinian relations. And this will be the Gaza withdrawal. And paradoxically, it will be Ariel Sharon, the right-winger, who calls for the disengagement of Gaza, which meant removing 8,000 plus residents, 21 villages, even the graves, they say even dead Jews had to be removed. And the paradox here, folks, is in this Palestinian state, which would have been, no Jews were allowed, even though in Israel there are 20% Arab population. And everyone always says the settlements are a block to peace, a block to a to a Palestinian state. Why wouldn't there be Jewish inhabitants of a Palestinian state if a real peace were ever brought about? But that's for another day and another time. And at the Gaza disengagement, I was very skeptical. You know what they say, fool me once, shame on you, fool me twice, shame on me. But I said we have to give one last chance. And Israel pulled out. Elliot Shadaf was supposed to speak for us last week until his neighbor fell in battle in Gaza, and it was postponed. But he, who is a military analyst, his view was that too many Israeli soldiers were tied up in the protection of these 8,000 residents of Gaza. And so strategically, it made more sense to pull out and then have a defensible border. Well, on October 7th, we understood that that wasn't so easy. First of all, missiles being fired over it and terrorist tunnels being dug under it. And so in retrospect, it does appear that the Gaza disengagement, or at least total disengagement without regulating what was going on there and going back in to make sure that military infrastructure was not built, was a grave mistake. And in 2006, the Gazans elected Hamas as the majority government over Fatah, over the PLO, who they killed many of them, threw them off rooftops, and then expelled them. So this, unfortunately, and Jewish philanthropists bought the greenhouses to give them over to Gaza so that it should have a functioning economy. They were trashed within weeks. And so this is the sad story of the Gaza disengagement. And Sharon, time after that, fell into a coma, and it was all very tragic. Now, an important development in the 1980s, we have to speak about Bibi Netanyahu. And what everyone thinks about Benjamin Netanyahu, he has now become the longest standing prime minister in Israel, having served longer than David Ben-Gurion. And we have to look at his early career, because his early career had some game-changing strategy policies that changed the future of Israel and that played a vital role in Israel becoming what it is today. His first tenure as prime minister was 96 to 99, but it's not then. It's afterwards. In 2003, when he became finance minister. And they say that what Sharon did is that Bibi was resistant to the Gaza withdrawal and to Sharon's foreign policy. So they say he wanted to neutralize him by bringing him into the government, and they had a deal. He said, Bibi, you don't deal with foreign policy at all, and you get to do what you want with the economy. Now, after 2005, when he stepped down from that position, I heard him speak. And he explained this. He said that his role of economic minister, he saw his job was to privatize the economy of the state of Israel, to remove it from its time of having been a socialist country, where many of the big industries were government owned and run, where there was heavy taxation, and to privatize it. Why? Because the people, when that process was going about, there was a lot of suffering, a lot of people on the brink of poverty, a lot of jobs disrupted. But he explained that it had to be done. Why? Because he said he understood that Iran had intentions to seek nuclear weapons. And Iran has vowed the destruction of Israel. So he explained that in order to counter Iran, Israel will need billions of dollars, tens of billions of dollars, in order to stop Iran. At the time, he was talking about billions, but now it's tens of billions. And he said the only way for Israel to achieve that would be by privatizing the economy and turning it into an economy which could generate great wealth. So he set about to totally change the country, to reduce the size of the public sector, government employees. He froze government spending for 3 years. He capped the budget deficit at 1%, which is unheard of for a Western country. The taxation system was streamlined, where before top earners were taxed 64%, that was reduced to 44%. Corporate tax was reduced from 36 to 18%, and state assets worth billions of dollars were privatized, including banks, oil refineries, El Al National Airline, Zim Shipping, which today is the 5th largest shipping company in the world. And this set the foundation for what will become the startup nation. And for that, Bibi played a vital role, which of course today we see how important it was. And it's not just that he was MIT educated, but he understood the strategic implications as well as the domestic implications. And Israel now has become one of the top Western countries with a GNP of $55,000 per resident and an economic and tech powerhouse. And really, it's these changes which set the foundation for that to happen. Netanyahu will, of course, become prime minister again in the late 2000s and will lead to the next dramatic change in the state of Israel. Because from the mid-2000s to after the Gaza disengagement to 2020, things were somewhat stable. There was a policy of what they called mowing the lawn. When the rockets from Gaza or the attacks from Lebanon got too bad, it would go in, suppress it. And 2006, Olmert led an military war into Lebanon, which had no defined goals and turned out to be an unfortunate chapter in Israel's history. But by and large, things were maintained. And in 2020, with Donald Trump becoming president and his son-in-law Jared Kushner pushing this initiative, an incredible breakthrough was achieved. The general outlook amongst the specialists was always that without a Palestinian peace treaty, nothing could happen in the Arab world. There could be no other advancement between Israel and the other Arab countries. Kushner came in, did not accept that premise, and started from ground zero. And this led to the Abraham Accords in 2020 with the UAE and Bahrain entering into peace treaties with Israel, and of course, economic treaties as well. Sudan and Morocco will join as well within a couple of years. And here to the right, you see a Jewish wedding in UAE, the Chabad rabbi, who was single at the time, getting married with the sheiks in attendance celebrating along with him. And of course, this showed great promise, and there were murmurs of Saudi Arabia joining, and then it's believed that now we have the documents showing that Iran's pushing, although some believe it was premature. Iran's proxy, Hamas, perpetrated what was perhaps the worst pogrom since World War II and the terrible October 7th invasion of Israel, the slaughtering of over 1,000 Israelis, and the great tragedy. Here you see Kfar Aza. These are my pictures. I went there a number of months afterwards. The sign on the front of the building shows that the inhabitants of that house were kidnapped and brought into Gaza. And of course, the terrible hostage situation that were taken from these homes. They tried to kill the music in Nova Festival as well. Each of these signs represents one of the partiers who was murdered by the Hamas. And for the last 2 years, we've seen Israel's pushback. Here on the right, you have those who make the ultimate sacrifice, 800 soldiers, half of them on October 7th, and half of them since have fallen in battle. But what we've also seen over the last 2 years is an incredible turn of events, where because we were pushed by Hamas and pushed back, Israel strategically was able to take out Hezbollah and the 150,000 rockets aimed at Israel. We were able to largely take out Hamas, although the job isn't quite finished, but no more missiles are being shot from there. The dramatic fall of the Syrian Assad government, which was also a proxy of Iran and funneling missiles to Hezbollah. And Israel's dismantling of Iran's air defenses, the taking out of its nuclear program, along with the final help of the US Army, US Air Force. And so we see that in the last 2 years, despite the terrible tragedy, the groundwork is being laid for the dismantling and the victory over our enemies. And the defeat of Iran, we hope, will soon come about, or the overthrow of the government. And these dramatic events have made it so that Israel is now positioned as a strong force in the Middle East. And of course, everyone likes a winner, as we've said before. So the talks are renewed with Saudi Arabia to perhaps enter into some kind of peace agreement or the Abraham Accords or some kind of treaty. And other countries, Arab countries, are said to be ready to join as well. How the Palestinian problem will be resolved, we don't know. But what we see is Israel is poised for incredible things. And Israel has become an incredible force in the future of tradition and tech. And you see here that the Western Wall and the Israeli flags, that really the destiny of our country is tied in with our Jewish values and with our Jewish identity and with the destiny of the future of the Jewish people, with our law of return, that Jews from all over the world are always welcome to come home and to become citizens of Israel. And Israel is really a new country which is just beginning to flourish. And so great things are in store. And of course, the tech future, Israel being a tech powerhouse. We saw the beginning of Israel with ag tech and drip irrigation. Then it became pharmaceuticals, Teva being the largest company at one point in Israel. Then it became defense contracting. But now it is the tech world, which is leading Israel into the 21st century and into being sought as a partner throughout the world. So this concludes our 7th installment of 3,300 years of Jewish history. And as we said, that Abraham's mission to be of justice and charity, and Isaiah's call to be a light unto the nations, and through Israel for the nations of the world to be blessed. We look forward to seeing the fulfillment of those promises. And it's yet to be figured out how Israel's Jewish values and Jewish identity are to be lived and are to be internally, and as we project them into the world. Israel has always sought to be a light unto the world. Israeli aid is always the first there at earthquakes, at tragedies, tech helping developing countries, Israel high tech, driving forward technology in incredible ways. The internet, the cell phone, and now with AI as well. So we look forward to beautiful things coming from Israel, and that our detractors will no longer be able to ignore the light, or at least to win over others to the side of darkness and the side of hate. And Israel is only seeking peace and to be a contributor on the world stage. And that is our dream and our goal. Thank you all for joining, and we hope you've enjoyed this drama of the Jewish people.